All right, here we go. This is going to be your ear tutorial. Just like we started with the heart, we're going to add a reference image. All right, I've changed this image to green so that it's easier to see my lines as I make them. Come down here, I'm going to hit G on the keyboard to grab that, Z to move it, I'm sorry, Y to move it back on that axis a little bit. So I'm looking at this from the Y-axis. Add mesh plane, and then I'm going to rotate that on the x-axis, so Rx for the shortcuts on the keyboard, 90 degrees. Grab that, move it on the y-axis so that it's in front of the ear image. Now I am going to use this to make the rest of the ear, but it's easier if I can see my image. So I'm going to go up to here. This is my shading properties, and I'm going to change the X-ray from off to on. Now I can see through my piece to my reference image. Let me go back and select my plane so that I can edit that and use tab to go into edit mode. If I use the G key on the keyboard and select the vertices first, if you click 1 on the keyboard to use the vertices, see up here this is selected. The 1, 2, 2, and 3 keys will cycle through which of these parts of your model that you are editing. You can do that by clicking up here, or while you're in your workspace, 1, 2, or 3 on the number keys will switch between those. So I could use the move tool all the time to do this. So if I'm just moving stuff, I can just use the move tool. Sometimes when I do that, I accidentally move stuff that I don't mean to. Here it's probably not going to cause any problems. So I can just use the move tool, or you can hit the G key. The nice thing about using the G key is that I don't have to be on top of my vertice with my mouse covering up stuff. I can be anywhere on my workspace and hit the G key, and it'll move the vertice I've selected. All right, so what we're going to do is we're basically going to trace the details of this ear with the vertices and then add faces as we go. So E to extrude a vertice, and then click to set the change. And we're just doing this. We're trying to keep our distances between our vertices about the same. That'll just make the mesh work a little bit better. And we're thinking in terms of, as we start to make these faces, we're going to think in terms of trying to keep those with 4 sides. So on the inside here, I'm going to move these They'll be a little bit narrower on the inside than they are on the outside. Now I'm going to switch from editing vertices to editing edges by hitting number 2 on the keyboard while my mouse is in my workspace. If I select this edge, we can fill these with faces by hitting the F key. Okay. It's the outside rim of my ear. Now I can start to go in and do some of the interior. Switching back to vertice editing mode by hitting 1 and using the extrude function again. And as I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about what the high areas are going to be. And again, trying to keep this as squares, as quads. When I go and edit this, sometimes it's going to be unavoidable and you're going to have triangles, but we're going to try to avoid instances where we have more than 2 or 3 lines coming into. Really, we want to try to have just like 2 directions of edges coming in. So like here's one direction of edges, here's another direction of edges. The more edges you have coming into one point, into one vertice, it just starts to get weird with your modeling. All right, here I've got an instance where I want to combine these two vertices. Right, I want this vertice welded to that vertice. So what I do is I select my first vertice and then the vertice I want it to weld to, and I use M on the keyboard to merge, and I'm going to pick last, like that. I'm going to go back to using my select tool. You can keep using the move tool or you can use the select tool. And I just hit E on the keyboard to continue extruding these out. And I'm doing the high areas of the ear first. So there's the outside edge, then this ridge that's up in here. Switch back to edge mode again. Select this edge and start filling that edge space. Now here as I'm filling this in, I see that if I split this edge here, I can make this a quad instead of keeping it. I'm just going to select the edge loop, and if I click in the middle of that line, that will split that line. And then when I go and hit F, sometimes you're going to come to a situation where if you just hit F, it's not going to know what to do. So you have to select the edges that you want the face to apply to. So here I'm going to go click these 3 by using Shift and holding down Shift and clicking on the 3 edges that I want to put a face across, and then hit F just like normal. And then I'll continue to fill that space with faces. Second, I need to take a little drink here. Help clear my throat. All right. And you just continue in this process thinking about um, what you're going to want it to look like when you are done. So in this area, it becomes a little bit complex because I've got this is going to be a face, this is going to be a face, and that would be quads easily. But then when I bring this one in, it's going to be more difficult to have a quad there. So I'm going to make the decision to make this into a triangle. And here I can just merge those two vertices at the center. So again, to merge a vertice, it's just M on the keyboard with the two vertices selected. And then back to adding faces. And then back to adding more vertices. It's almost like you're doing a puzzle or a game where you are, as you do these things, you're looking, you're kind of looking ahead to think, as I, make these lines around here, how I'm going to keep this so that it has number of vertices it would take in order for each of those sections to have a quad in it. Okay. I was checking there. I thought I messed up for a second. Control Z will undo. So if I made this face and I want to undo, if I hit Control Z on the keyboard, I can go back a couple times. I think it's up to I don't know, 7, depending on what it is you're doing. All right. Here I'm going to try to got another situation where I've got an area where I might have to put a triangle in there because down here, these are going to be easy to put a face across, right? I can do this and face that, but if I do here, I'm going to end up with a face with five sides to it. So I think I'm going to do like I did over here. I'm going to hit number 1 to edit the vertices. I'm going to take these two vertices and merge those at the center. So M, and then with the two vertices selected in center. Then I can switch back to edge mode by hitting 2, selecting one of those faces, and hitting F to extrude a face. Now here, I know that there's going to be that indentation there that's pretty, goes pretty far back from the outside of the ear. So I have to decide, do I want the extra polygons coming down the middle here, and these are just going to be really narrow faces, or do I want that to be just, do I want this to merge into one face here and then have fewer polygons down here? And I think I want this to merge, so I can do this, so this reduces this as it continues by adding another try here. And then I'm going to split this one. So this is my loop cut tool, which is right here on the left-hand side. And then add some more vertices here. And all of the key clicks are shown down at the bottom of the screen if you hadn't picked up on that. Sometimes when you're working through stuff, you just start to do things. And especially after you've done it quite a bit, you don't even, it's like you don't really think about what you're doing. You just go and you kind of just get into the creative flow, and it happens. And you're making stuff without thinking about it. So I'm going to go ahead and continue extruding out my vertices and fill in the space. Now don't forget that on this part of the ear, we've got a part of the ear that comes out, so it kind of comes forward from the rest of the ear. This part is inset and then goes back into the ear canal down here. So you have to be thinking while you're doing this, so that you're kind of, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And by the time that you get there, you kind of have a plan for it. And sometimes the plan works out, and sometimes you gotta, rethink it a little bit. I'm trying to line this up. I'm trying to break this up so that I can use as many quads as possible. And you'll notice up here, when I divided that, this actually turned from a triangle into a quad. All right, and that looks pretty good. So that's good, except that that is very flat for a ear. So what we need to do is we need to start adding some thickness to it. And we're going to do that by using the extrude option. So now I'm going to select 3 on the keyboard to move into face editing mode. I'm going to depress the mouse, middle mouse scrolly wheel button, and go around to the side here. I'm going to hit something that sometimes happens. I'm going to go ahead and hide my image because I don't need that anymore. You'll notice here how these 2 faces are a different shade than the rest of this. And sometimes what happens when you're modeling it like this is that it'll flip a face on you, but you won't notice until you're trying to do other things like sculpting or extruding and things like that. So one way to check and make sure that all your faces are in the right direction is to go up here to this is called the view overlays, and I'm going to go all the way down. Most of this stuff I never deal with, but I'm going to go all the way down here to facial orientation. I'm going to turn that on, and then I'm going to turn off X-ray mode. All right, so now you see that we have blue faces here, and we have the rest are red faces. So what that means is that when I rotated my plane, I rotated it so that I was looking at the back side of it and didn't notice. But that's a pretty easy fix. If I hit A to select all, mesh, go down to normals. So A to select all the faces, go up here to the mesh menu, click on that, go down to normals, and I can recalculate outside. Now I'm looking at the back side of this, but I want the Y plus axis to be the front, just for my modeling preferences. If you don't mind, you can go and model it this way. I don't know why, but this is direction is the way that appeals to me. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to mesh with everything still selected, normals and flip. And now you can see all the faces are blue on this side and red on this side, which means this is the back, or rather the inside of those faces, and this is the outside. So positive, negative when you're using the sculpture tool. So it'll be either a positive direction or a negative direction. All right, so back to what we were doing. We're going to add some thickness to this, so we're going to use the extrude option. So I've got everything selected. I'm going to hit E on the keyboard, and I'm going to drag this out. All right, and we're going to drag this out so that it's, I don't want it the full thickness of the ear, maybe like half the thickness of what my ear is going to be. So about like there, whatever looks good to you. Now you'll notice on this side that used to be red, now it's blue again. But if I do, I'm going to delete this. Oh, that's not the right key. I'm going to delete this face. And now you can see that it has the inside, and the inside of the mesh is red. All right, and that's as it should be. So click on 2 again, hit F. 2 is to go to edge mode, or the edge edit mode, and F is to fill the face. All right, so now I've got about half the thickness of my ear. But these parts that I drew first are the parts that need to come out. So if I need my reference image, I can bring that up again, tab out of edit mode, select my all right. I don't know how I managed to select it, but I did. So here's the cursor. Sometimes when you do things and you like click this and you move this around, it causes you problems. So I typically like to always keep my cursor in the middle of my workspace. I'm going to make sure I'm in. Make sure I'm in the middle of my workspace here. Here's my cursor. And if I hit Shift A, I'm sorry, Shift S, Shift A selects all. Shift S will bring up this menu. And I want to set my cursor to my world origin. All right, that puts it right back there on that crossbar. So that's where I want it. So if anytime that little circle there moves and you're not intending it to, like in more advanced Blender tutorials, you're going to be moving that cursor and it'll be useful. But for us, we just want to leave it there in the center. So it helps when you're adding stuff to keep your stuff in alignment if you just leave it at the world origin. Later on, you're going to be aligning things in different places as opposed to just straight up. Like when you're doing more complex modeling, you're going to want to be able to move that. So if you hold down Shift plus S, you can move your cursor all sorts of places. But we want, for us, at the beginning, we're going to leave it in the middle. So that's how, if you move it back to the middle, Shift S, cursor to world origin. All right. So what we were trying to do is we were trying to select our, I did it again. Shift S, cursor to world origin. Selection tool. Now we're going to select our empty, our reference image. We're going to grab that and we're going to move it on the x-axis so that we can see it at the same time that we're modeling. So anyway, here's the raised part of the ears, right? Select my ear, hit tab to go into edit mode, and then I'm going to go into face mode by hitting 3 on the keyboard. And I'm going to look at the raised areas of the ear, which were the first things that I modeled. I don't know why it keeps going back to the selection tool. or to the cursor tool. Anyway, there we go. So if I want to select something that is in a row, I can click once, and if I hold down Control, well, if I hold down Control and it's in a clear line, it will start to select those things, and then I hit Shift to select things that are not attached. And then up here, it's kind of this Y shape. Now, if it doesn't look exactly right currently, we can always edit that when we go into sculpture mode. All right, but what we're going to do is we're going to get the general shape first, just like when you're doing painting or anything else. You're going to get the general shape first, and then you're going to go back in and clean it up and get more specific shapes. So this part of the ear sticks out from the surrounding areas. So I'm going to take that, use my middle mouse button depressed and held down to orbit around to the right side. And I'm going to extrude that out again. Now, it doesn't have to be like a lot. So that should be pretty good. Now, some of this goes back in and stays in, some of this comes out. So here we have a part of the ear. This goes back into the interior of the ear right here. And that kind of goes back in deeper. So I can take this and I'm going to merge some of these vertices. So merge at last, select the furthest one out, and then the one that's in, and then merge at last. And that'll start to bring that back in before I even get to the sculpture tools. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to extrude the outermost part one more time, just to give that a little bit more, because underneath here, this part that is in this Y goes back up underneath here. So I'm going to go back to the face selection mode. I probably don't need all of that selected. I do about there. And then I'm going to hit E to extrude and bring that out just a little bit. And then just like I did with here, I'm going to take these vertices and merge them back in. So select the furthest one out and then the furthest one in that you want to merge, and merge at last. Okay. All right. Now, this is pretty good, but it's kind of blocky. And our shape isn't quite right just yet. So we're going to do a couple things that'll make our lives easier and get this ear looking pretty good before we go into sculpture mode. All right, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over here to our modifiers property. And in the modifiers property, we're going to go to generate. So add modifier generate. And then in the generate menu, we're going to go down to the subdivision surfaces. Now, and just for visual preferences, I'm going to take this and turn off the face orientation by clicking F. Or I'm sorry, by clicking, not by clicking F, by clicking on this facial orientation checkbox up here and the viewport overlays menu. All right. Okay. This part of the ear looks a little weird. We're going to fix that when we go into sculpture mode, so don't worry about that. If I were just doing like a cartoon style head or character, this is great the way that it is. But we're going to keep pushing it a little bit, make it a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to go ahead and put those up to 3. I'm going to tab out of edit mode. And again, your mouse, in order for your shortcuts to work on your keyboard, your mouse has to be in your workspace. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Control S to save. And I'm going to save this as ear tutorial. All right. This is my 3D files, your tutorial. For you guys, you're going to save it under C, your username, and then documents. So C, user, username, documents. All right, save Blender file. All right, now it's saved. Now if my program crashes or whatever, I know that it's saved and I haven't lost all that work. All right, so that all looks good. We're in object mode. We can apply our subdivision modifier. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, if I wanted to, because ears don't stand straight up and down like that, they stick out a little bit more at the top and so on. If I wanted to, I could use lattice modifier, lattice deform, and do all the shaping with regard to that with the lattice deform. But you can do the same thing using the sculpture tools, or well, similar things using the sculpture tools. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my ear, click up here on the object mode, and go down to sculpture mode. This will bring up my sculpture tools. For now, we're going to leave dynamic topology off. Here we don't have any right-left symmetry. We'll do symmetry once we've finished the ear by making a mirror modifier, and then we'll mirror it on the other side of the head that way. But here we're just going to use our draw and smooth tools to start to get this to look the way that we want it. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to knock down these sharp kind of corners so that we don't have those using the smooth tool. So that's the first thing I'm going to do, is just kind of smooth this out a bit so that it's not so square around the edges. And I think maybe my smooth tool is a little bit too strong there, so I reduce the, I'm going to hide my reference for now because I don't need it at this time. Okay, and that's not looking too bad, but we can do more. So the ear canal is going to come back in this area. All right. So we're going to increase our radius on this is the elastic deform tool over here on the left. And then I'm going to reduce the radius some. I'm going to grab the part of my ear which is supposed to come back in for my ear canal. I'm going to pull that back in. And while I'm doing this part of the ear on the back comes in also. That's going to come back in, and that should be up against the side of our head. Right, and it might not be a bad idea to go ahead and put something in here to use as a reference for where the side of that is. So I'm going to go back into object mode. I'm just going to add a cube for now. And I'm going to, for you guys, you should already have part of your torso from the bust tutorial. So I'm just going to add a cube and kind of put it here where the side of the head would be for reference. And then take this and inset that. I'm just making this so that Um, I can kind of have a place where the ear touches the side of the head, and then I can bring the ear canal in without going through the box. So that's all that is. You can do that or not as you want. But for me, it kind of helps to have something there so that I can look at it and know where the side of my head is. Why would I want to just sculpt the ear? Like if I'm going to do like a lot of modeling, and ears are kind of one of those things that are individual. For the individual person, like everybody's ears looks a little bit different. Um, so, but sometimes I don't want to do like the whole thing. Like the ear's going to be covered up. I just need something in there to hold that place. I might just make like an ear to have, and then I can put that on a model and then start to adjust the shape of the ear and make it kind of, more how that specific character's ears look um, by just, you know, m- modifying it just a little bit. All right, so this part of my ear dips in too much, so I'm going to bring that out. Here's the draw tool. This is where you'll find out if you didn't look before, this is where you'll find out whether you have backward faces, because your directions on your modeling here will be opposite. So if if the faces here were inside out, like I'll show you here, just so that you'll know. Select all, mesh, and we're going to normals, flip. Now you're not going to notice any difference here because we don't have our facial orientation shown. So, but if I turn that on, you can see that's all red. All right, makes it really hard to see stuff. All right, but if I go here, right, I can't tell that all of those faces are inside out. And if I use my draw tool and I draw on that, I have the positive draw tool selected, but you can see how it's pushing that in as I draw. We don't want that. So if you see that happening, you'll know that your faces are inside out. So go back to edit mode. Those are inside out. Mesh, everything selected. Normals, recalculate outside. And that will typically take care of that. All right, go back to sculpture mode. And now I've got my positive selected, and as I use that, it goes the correct direction now. Now, on your draw tool, you have some different things. So just like anything, you have keyboard shortcuts. Here, if I use my draw tool, regular without any key depressed, I can draw this stuff out. All right. If I hit shift on the keyboard, what happens is it uses that as a smooth tool. Right. So if I go and I do something, I go, that went further than I wanted it to go. I can click shift and hold it, and then that becomes a smoothing tool. And then I can also, instead of coming up here and hitting the minus, so I want this area to go back in more, I can hold down control, and that will then push that area in instead of pulling it out. So here, this area needs to be pushed in because that little rim on your ear kind of goes out. Use my smooth tool for this area, and then draw tool up here to pull this out so that I get that kind of underneath area on that ridge of the ear that gradually gets softer as you move around. Right, and then I want to do the same thing here. Oh, helps if I can look at the thing in a way I can actually see it. And then draw this out. And if it gets a little bit rough at times, don't worry, you can always go back and smooth it later. Like this area is getting a little bit gnarly. So I hit shift and kind of smooth out the high points. This guy was a boxer or something, I don't know. And I just go about and refine the shape of my ear until you're happy with it for the style of sculpture that you're doing. So if you're doing something more like cartoon oriented or more fantasy oriented, your ears might not be as like realistic as they would be otherwise. So, all right. The other thing I can do here is that now that I've got my basic ear done, I can do all sorts of modifications to it. So I'm going to go ahead and, well, let's do this first. I want to make this, and let's say I wanted to make, so I got my basic ear that I've saved because it saves me time in the future, right? When I want to make different characters. But this time I want my character to have like, say I want it to have like pointy ears or something. So I can import this ear into my file for whatever it is I'm making and put it in place. And then I can say, well, this character's got pointy ears. So I have a couple different ways of doing that. I can use my sculpture tool and kind of, drag this out, right? And reshape the ear here. Okay, and that's not bad. I have to do some resculpting on that, but it's okay. That's one way of doing it. So let me put this back to the way it was. And actually, while I'm at this, let me go ahead and save this. Oh, go back to edit mode. Sorry, object mode. Control S is the shortcut for saving. Sometimes I get a little bit paranoid about it and hit it a couple times just to make sure that I've hit it. All right, so the other way of going about modifying this ear is to go in and do a, so I've got the object selected, I'm in object mode. Here's where we kind of struggled last time with our deform modifier. So I'm going to add modifier, deform, lattice. There's the lattice operation, which is here. All right, so that's the modifier operation, right? And then we're going to click into our workspace and we're going to add. And there's a couple ways of doing this. I can go up here to the add, or I can hit shift, Control A. No. Anyway. Yeah, shift A, and then I can come down to lattice and add, or I can go up to the add menu and lattice and add a lattice. So shift A, go down to lattice, add my lattice. Then I'm going to hit S to scale. And I'm going to scale that up, move that so that my ear's in the center. And then I'm going to hit S to scale and then Z for the Z axis. And then I'm going to hit S to scale and X on the X axis. I'm going to look at it from the X axis. I want this to just be right in the center of that so I don't have too much more selected. So S to scale and then Y to scale on the Y axis, and keep that ear inside that box like that. All right, for this part we don't need the cube, so I'm going to go ahead and hide the cube. And then I might that over a little bit and then scale that down on the Y axis again. Does it absolutely need to be that close to the ear? May not really, but the closer my vertices are on my lattice, the better they work to modify what it is I'm modifying. All right, so now I've got it appropriately scaled. I'm going to select my ear, and this lattice modifier that we added now has to have a target. Which lattice, like, because I might have, let's say I've got two lattices. This is lattice 001. My lattice modifier needs to know which lattice I'm using to modify the shape. So here we're going to select lattice, which is this one right here, the one that we want. And I'm going to delete that one because I don't need it. So now that I've selected this as my lattice modifier property, I've selected the lattice for the ear, right, which is this one here. I can go in there and I can, I want to be able to manipulate it. Like if I just go tab to edit it, right, and I select those and I grab them and I move them, that deforms a lot of stuff. I don't want to deform all that stuff at the same time. So what I need to do is I need to go into the data properties for the lattice, which are down here. You can see this little green. It looks like the same image that I use for the lattice, right? So I go into my data properties and I want to go ahead and kind of increase some of those. I think that ought to be good. So you can think of these points as kind of like these vertices on the lattice is kind of like a gravitational source. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull on our object, right? So it'll pull all the vertices on this and all the faces on this and all the planes on this that are closest to it towards it. Right now, as it sits and hasn't been moved, everything's at equilibrium. So it's not pulling towards any of those things. But if I start to move those, so here I want to make sure that both the front and the back are selected. So if I click and drag over the top, then that gets both of those if I'm looking at it from the y-axis. I can grab that with the G and move that out. Grab this with the G, move that out. Now, this does some similar things to the elastic deform tool, but there's some things that I can't do with that. So if I want to rotate that on the y-axis, right? Now I've got a nicely shaped kind of point here, and that's something that I couldn't really do with my elastic deform tool that the lattice deform tool allowed me to do. For me, I like this better because if I tab out of this, and let's say that, I'm not liking this, I can delete that lattice and all of the changes are done. Or if I go back into the ear and then I go into tab, I can see, my ear normal again. So if I undo the lattice deform, this is what it looks like, right? And then if I redo it, this is what it looks like. So with the deform tool, with the elastic deform tool, you don't have that option of seeing your kind of before and after to decide whether your changes are something that you want to keep or not. And that is how you make it your. So hopefully this is helpful. Oh, one last thing before I go. I wanted to show you, I'm going to go ahead and I like the shape of that. And I'm going to go ahead and go to my modifier properties. So I've got my ear selected, modifier properties. This little down arrow here next to the camera on the modifier property. Click that and then click apply. And now I can get rid of this lattice. All right, so let's say that I've got let's say that this cube is the head of my person, right? And I want to have an ear on either side of it. Actually, let's do this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this ear over. All right, I'm going to go cube, just like I was going to start to make this into an actual head here, right? we're not going to do the whole process, but let's say that's the head that I'm going to use. All right, and I want an ear on either side of that head. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this ear and I'm going to move it where I want it on this side of the head. Okay, assuming that my origin and cursor are set to the middle of my thing. I can see that the origin for the head is right there in the center. So that orange dot tells you where the origin of your object is. So right now, the origin of my object is right in the middle of my ear. So if I go to modifier properties and I add a mirror modifier, I'm going to go ahead and turn off merge because I don't want those to be stuck together. You can see, well, number one, that's the wrong axis. So I want to change that from, oh, now it looks like a flower. So I want to change that to Z, right? But that doesn't work. Okay, in order to get the ear to work right, we have to change the origin of the ear because it's going to reflect across that axis that I've selected. So Z in this case, and actually that's not right either. So before I do that, because the Z axis, it should be top to bottom, right? But it's not doing that. And the reason why it's not doing that is because I flipped, this used to be a plane, and I flipped it on its side. All right, so in order to make sure that my origin here matches the origin of my scene, I'm going to hit Control and A, which is apply. I'm going to go down to all transformations. All right, now you'll see that the Z origin over here matches the scene, so that needs to be on Y. And you'll see that when I hit and applied those things, because I had my ear already moved over, now you can see that it is mirroring across the axis correctly. So now I've got an ear on either side of my head. Then, because it's mirrored, I can say, well, those point straight back. I think that they need to be kind of rotated a little bit. So I can go into tab to edit mode, and then I can just kind of select all and rotate those on the Z axis. And I can tilt them out away from the head a little bit, or I can go and add another lattice deform, or I can do the sculpture, or, there's always more than one way to do things. One way isn't necessarily more correct than the other way. It just gives you slightly different results. So that's how you make some ears. I hope that was helpful, and good luck.